The transport shuttle touched down on Station Harmony 7 with barely a whisper of sound. Ambassador gathered her belongings, checking one last time on the special cargo container sitting beside her seat. Inside, wrapped in warming blankets and resting on a heated pad, Apollo waited patiently for the journey to end. The ball python had made the trip from Earth without complaint, as calm and gentle as always. Had volunteered for this assignment eagerly. The Galactic Pedagogy Council had created a beautiful program, really. Every species in the Alliance would send a companion animal to the station's learning complex. Students from a dozen different worlds would learn about the special bonds between sentient beings and the creatures from their home planets. It was meant to build understanding, to show younglings that despite their differences, all civilized species shared the capacity for love and care toward other living things. The airlock opened with a soft hiss. Standing on the other side was Shimmer of Dawn, the station's education coordinator. The floated at eye level, her crystalline body catching the light and throwing rainbow patterns across the walls. Her internal glow pulsed with a warm, welcoming yellow. "Ambassador, we are so delighted you have arrived." Shimmer of Dawn's voice came through the translation device, musical and excited. "The younglings have been counting the cycles until Earth's contribution arrived. They have seen the database images of your companion animals. So many questions about these dogs and cats that humans bond with." Smiled and carefully lifted the transport container. "I brought something I think will be very educational." "Wonderful, come, come. We have prepared a beautiful habitat in the central common area. Temperature controlled, humidity regulated, everything your creature needs to be comfortable." Shimmer of Dawn floated ahead, leading through the station's corridors. "The contribution arrived 2 days ago. Our crystal jellyfish have been such a hit. They sing to the children and their music helps with meditation studies." They passed through a wide corridor where young students of various species played together. A group of children, their fur neatly groomed and their whiskers twitching with curiosity, stopped to stare at in her container. They were small, about a meter tall, with 6 legs and large, expressive eyes. They looked like a cross between mice and rabbits, if either of those Earth animals had evolved intelligence and a love of mathematics. "Is that the Earth animal?" one of them squeaked. "Soon, little one," Shimmer of Dawn said gently. "The unveiling ceremony is in 1 hour. Go tell your friends." The young scampered away and could hear excited chittering echoing down the hallway. She felt a small flutter of nervousness in her stomach. She had assumed, perhaps wrongly, that the galaxy would find snakes as fascinating as humans did. Ball pythons were perfect pets after all. Docile, beautiful, easy to care for, and wonderful for teaching responsibility and respect for nature. The common area was impressive. It occupied the heart of the education complex, a vast circular room with a transparent dome showing the stars above. Different habitats had been set up around the perimeter, each one carefully designed for a specific creature. Could see the crystal jellyfish floating in their containment field, their bodies pulsing with soft light. Nearby, the burrow mice played in an elaborate tunnel system. The chromatic tree sloths hung from artificial branches, their scales slowly shifting through blues and greens. "Here is your space," Shimmer of Dawn indicated a corner setup. A large glass enclosure sat ready, fitted with heating elements, hiding spots, climbing branches, and a water dish. "We researched Earth reptiles extensively. I hope this meets your needs." "It's perfect," said honestly. The station staff had done their homework. "Apollo will love it." "Apollo, such a strong name. From your ancient mythology, yes." Shimmer of Dawn's glow brightened with pleasure. "I am so excited to meet him. Is he very fluffy? The images of Earth mammals show such wonderful fur." "Not exactly fluffy," said carefully, "but he's beautiful in his own way." The hour passed quickly. Transferred Apollo to his new home, making sure the temperature was exactly right, watching as he explored his new enclosure with that slow, deliberate movement that snakes did so well. He found the warm spot under the heat lamp and coiled there, content and calm. Students began to arrive, shepherded by their teachers. The room filled with excited chatter in a dozen different languages, all filtered through translation devices. Counted at least 50 younglings, representing every major species in the Alliance. The children floated near the ceiling, the clustered in small groups, their noses twitching with curiosity. The students stood tall on their powerful legs, their scaled bodies reflecting the room's light. There were others too, species was still learning to identify. The administrator, a large named Bristle of Authority, called for attention. His dark fur was graying with age, and his voice carried natural authority. Students, teachers, honored guests, today we continue our celebration of life's diversity. We have learned about the crystal jellyfish of, the burrow mice of, the chromatic sloths of. Today, we welcome Earth's contribution to our learning community. All eyes turned to and the glass enclosure. She could feel the weight of their attention, their excitement. Humans, Bristle of Authority continued, are a remarkable species. They have joined our alliance recently, bringing new perspectives and technologies. We are honored that Ambassador has personally delivered their chosen companion animal. Ambassador, please introduce your friend. Stepped forward, her hand resting on the glass. Inside, Apollo raised his head slightly, tongue flicking out to taste the air. Thank you all for this warm welcome. On Earth, humans have bonded with many different animals throughout our history. We have loved creatures large and small, wild and domestic. Today, I'd like to introduce you to Apollo, a ball python. He represents the special relationship humans have built with reptiles. She could see confusion on some faces. The word reptile was translating oddly, she realized. Some species didn't have a direct equivalent in their language. Let me show you, said simply. She reached into the enclosure through the access door, moving slowly and deliberately. Apollo, recognizing her scent, remained calm as she lifted him. He wrapped around her forearm with gentle pressure, his muscular body coiling in loose loops. Turned to face the audience, holding Apollo out slightly so everyone could see. The reaction was not what she expected. The first scream came from a student in the front row. High-pitched and terrified, it cut through the room like a blade. The young fell backward, scrambling away on all 6 legs. That single scream triggered a cascade of panic. The children broke ranks, fleeing in every direction. Their teachers tried to maintain order but were clearly fighting their own instincts. Saw one adult, fur standing straight up in terror, physically blocking her student's view with her own body. The students fared only slightly better. Their scales flashed through rapid color changes, bright reds and oranges that's database identified as extreme alarm. Several of them backed toward the exits, their tails lashing. Even the children, who had no evolutionary history with predators like snakes, dimmed their lights and retreated toward the ceiling. Only the fact that they could float kept them from joining the general stampede. Stop, everyone stop, called out, but her voice was lost in the chaos. Apollo, disturbed by the noise and sudden movement, tightened his grip on her arm slightly. It was a comfort-seeking behavior, completely harmless, but several students who saw it screamed louder. Shimmer of dawn floated down, her crystalline body flickering rapidly between colors. Ambassador, put it back. Put the creature back now. Shocked and confused, quickly returned Apollo to his enclosure. The moment the snake disappeared into his hiding spot, the panic began to subside. But the damage was done. Half the students had fled the common area entirely. Those who remained were pressed against the far walls, as far from the glass enclosure as possible. Bristle of Authority approached, moving with visible effort against his instincts. His fur was still bristled, making him look twice his normal size. Ambassador, he said, his voice carefully controlled. That is your companion animal. That is what you brought to teach our children about bonding and care. Yes, said still bewildered. Apollo is a ball python. He's 5 years old. He's never bitten anyone. He's completely docile and... That is a snake, a teacher interrupted, her scales still flashing red. An apex predator, an ambush hunter, that is not a companion animal. That is a creature designed by evolution to kill. The word hit like cold water. She looked around the room, really seeing the faces of the aliens for the first time. The wide eyes, the defensive postures, the instinctive fear. She had made a terrible mistake. "I don't understand," she said quietly. "On Earth, ball pythons are one of the most popular pets. We have millions of them in homes, in schools, in breeding programs. They're gentle. They're beautiful. Children keep them." "Human children?" Shimmer of Dawn asked, her voice almost a whisper. "Yes, of course. Usually with adult supervision, but yes." The education coordinator's glow shifted to a color had never seen before, purple mixed with green in swirling patterns. "You let your younglings interact with predators. Intentionally." "They're not dangerous," protested. "Ball pythons are called that because they curl into a ball when scared. They're defensive, not aggressive. Apollo has never hurt anyone." A small voice came from the doorway. "What does it eat?" Turned to see a young, braver than the others, peering around the doorframe. "He eats mice, small mice, once a week." The youngster's eyes went impossibly wide. It eats shaped things." And there it was. The fundamental misunderstanding laid bare. Looked at the students, really looked at them, and saw prey animals. Small, fuzzy, with large eyes positioned on the sides of their heads for maximum awareness of predators. They, despite their size, had the same wide-set eyes, the same quick reflexes of creatures that had once been hunted. "How many sentient species in the Alliance evolved from prey animals?" asked slowly. Bristle of Authority answered, his voice grim. 39 of 47. The others evolved from herbivores, scavengers, or omnivores. Only 3 species, including humans, evolved from apex predators. Felt her stomach drop. She looked at Apollo, peaceful and calm in his hiding spot, and saw him suddenly through alien eyes. Not a pet, not a companion, but a hunter, a killer. A thing from nightmares encoded into genetic memory over millions of years of evolution. "I need to call an emergency meeting," Shimmer of Dawn said quietly. "Now." The room emptied quickly, teachers ushering students away while casting fearful glances back at the glass enclosure. Stood alone in the common area, still trying to process what had just happened. Around the perimeter, the other companion animals went about their peaceful business. Crystal jellyfish hummed their songs. Burrow mice played in their tunnels. Chromatic sloths dozed on their branches. And in the corner, behind thick glass, Apollo the ball python rested on his heating pad, unaware that his mere existence had just created the greatest diplomatic incident of Ambassador's career. She touched the glass gently, looking at the snake she had raised from a hatchling. "What have I done, buddy?" she whispered. Apollo, as always, had no answer. He simply existed, beautiful and ancient and utterly himself. A perfect ball python, a perfect predator. And that, was beginning to realize, was exactly the problem. The emergency meeting convened in Conference Room 3, chosen specifically because it had no windows facing the common area. Sat at the long table, surrounded by administrators, education specialists, and what appeared to be a hastily assembled crisis team. Shimmer of Dawn occupied the seat across from her, no longer glowing with welcoming warmth. This crystalline body had settled into a steady, cold blue. Bristle of Authority called the meeting to order. His fur had finally settled back to its normal position, but his movements remained tense and controlled. "Let us begin by establishing facts without panic. Ambassador, please explain your selection process for Earth's companion animal contribution." Took a breath, organizing her thoughts. The Galactic Pedagogy Council sent specifications. The animal should represent the bond between humans and other species. It should be safe for educational environments. It should be transportable and adaptable to station life. Ball pythons meet all those requirements. "Safe?" An administrator named Scale of Wisdom leaned forward. His coloring had stabilized to a dark, professional gray, but could see the tension in his posture. You consider that creature safe? Yes, absolutely. Ball pythons are constrictors, but they're small. Apollo is full-grown at about a meter long and maybe a kilogram in weight. He couldn't hurt a human child, much less an adult. His instinct when threatened is to curl into a defensive ball, not to attack. It kills to eat, Scale of Wisdom stated flatly. Well, yes, he's a carnivore, but we feed him pre-killed, frozen-thawed mice. There's no actual hunting involved. He just eats. Shimmer of Dawn's glow flickered with something that might have been curiosity despite the tension. Pre-killed, you kill the prey for it. Commercially raised, humanely euthanized, frozen for storage and transported. It's standard practice for reptile keeping, safer for the snake and more humane for the prey. A long silence followed this explanation. Finally, an education specialist named Whisker of Learning spoke up. She was older, her fur graying, and she seemed to be fighting to keep her voice steady. Ambassador, I need you to understand what you have brought to this station. Do you know what snakes represent in galactic culture? I'm beginning to realize I don't, admitted. Whisker of Learning pulled up a holographic display. Images flickered to life above the table. These are serpentanalogues from 40 different worlds, snake-like predators that evolved to hunt small, warm-blooded prey. The images were remarkably similar despite coming from wildly different ecosystems. Long, sinuous bodies, unblinking eyes, mouths that opened impossibly wide. Has the tunnel viper. It hunts in burrows, striking from darkness. One bite contains enough neurotoxin to kill an adult in minutes. Whisker of Learning's voice shook slightly. Stories of tunnel vipers are told to children to teach them caution. They appear in our nightmares, our art, our cultural memory as symbols of death from below. Another administrator, a named Crystal of Depths, added their own images. Has the crystal snake. It mimics our own refractive properties, becoming nearly invisible until it strikes. Young are conditioned from hatching to recognize the subtle distortions they create. Scale of Wisdom showed the version. The scale shadow, an ambush predator that matches its colors to its surroundings perfectly. It can wait motionless for hours, then strike faster than the eye can follow. The images continued, species after species, world after world. Every one of them had a snake analog. Every one of them had evolved with these creatures as major predators. The pattern was clear and terrible. For most species in this alliance, Bristle of Authority said quietly, serpents are the primal fear. They are the monster in the dark, the death that strikes without warning. They are encoded into our most basic survival instincts. Looked at the images, her mind reeling. But Apollo isn't like these. He's not venomous. He's not an ambush hunter. He's been bred in captivity for generations to be gentle. It does not matter, Whisker of Learning said. The shape is enough. The movement is enough. The way it tastes the air with that tongue, the way it moves without limbs, the unblinking stare. These things trigger responses that bypass our conscious minds. Shimmer of Dawn finally spoke, her voice thoughtful despite the circumstances. Ambassador, help me understand. Humans evolved from primates, yes, tree-dwelling creatures. Partially, yes, though we spent time on the ground too. So humans also would have been prey to serpentanalogues. Your ancient ancestors would have faced these predators. You should have the same instinctive fear. Paused, considering. We do, actually, or we did. Fear of snakes is one of the most common phobias among humans. Studies show that even human infants react more quickly to images of snakes than to other stimuli. It's probably hardwired into us from our evolutionary past. And yet you keep them as pets, Scale of Wisdom said. It wasn't a question, more like he was trying to process an impossible fact. Yes. Why? It was the simplest question and the hardest to answer. Thought about her own journey with reptiles, about the first time she'd held a snake at a nature center as a child. The fear, yes, but also the fascination. The wonder of something so different, so ancient, so perfectly itself. Because we're curious, she said finally. Because understanding something removes fear, or at least transforms it into respect. Because humans have this tendency to look at things that scare us and want to know more. That is insane, Whisker of Learning said flatly. Respectfully, Ambassador, that is a completely irrational response to danger. Maybe, agreed. But it's very human. We domesticated wolves, which were pack hunters that competed with us for resources. We keep cats, which are obligate carnivores with hunting instincts that never fully disappear. We have enthusiasts who keep venomous snakes, large constrictors, monitor lizards, even spiders and scorpions. There's an entire subculture devoted to reptile keeping. The room fell silent again. Could see the administrators exchanging glances, their various forms of body language all expressing the same thing, disbelief mixed with a kind of horrified fascination. Crystal of Depth spoke carefully. Let me ensure I understand correctly. Humans, who evolved as prey to these creatures who still carry instinctive fear of them, deliberately bring them into their homes, into spaces where their young ones live. Supervised usually, but yes. And this is common. Ball pythons specifically. There are probably millions kept as pets on Earth. Reptile keeping in general is one of the fastest-growing hobbies in human culture. Bristle of Authority made a sound that the translator rendered as thoughtful confusion. He groomed his whiskers, a nervous habit. Ambassador, I must ask you a difficult question. Is this perhaps related to human psychology? Your species' history of warfare, your aggressive expansion into space, your tendency toward risk-taking behaviors. Are humans perhaps different in ways we have not fully appreciated? Wanted to be offended but found she couldn't be. It was a fair question. Humans are predators too, she said quietly. We have forward-facing eyes like Apollo. We evolved to hunt, but we're also intensely social. We form bonds across genetic lines, across species lines. We're capable of incredible empathy alongside our capacity for aggression. That seems contradictory, Scale of Wisdom observed. Maybe that's the point. Maybe it's not contradictory at all. Maybe understanding predators is easier for us because we recognize something of ourselves in them. Shimmer of Dawn's color shifted again, this time to a bright, analytical white. You are saying that humans relate to predators as equals rather than as threats. In a way, yes. We respect them. We recognize them as fellow survivors, creatures doing what their nature demands. And that recognition creates a different kind of relationship. A relationship built on understanding predatory nature, Whisker of Learning said slowly, rather than on innocence or gentleness. Nodded. Apollo isn't innocent, he's a predator, but he's also gentle in his own way. He's not aggressive. He doesn't attack unnecessarily. He exists according to his nature, which includes both hunting for food and seeking warmth and safety. Humans have learned to appreciate both aspects. The meeting continued for another hour, circling around the same fundamental points. The administrators were clearly struggling with concepts that went against every instinctive understanding they had. A companion animal in their conception should be comforting and safe, something that represented innocence and the gentle side of nature. Apollo represented something entirely different. He represented humanity's strange relationship with danger, their willingness to embrace the wild and predatory, their capacity to find beauty in things that should inspire fear. Finally, Bristle of Authority called for a break. We need time to process this information, and we need to determine what to do with the situation. The students are frightened. Parents are calling. We have a responsibility to provide a safe learning environment. Apollo is safe, insisted. He's behind secure glass. He cannot escape. He cannot hurt anyone. Physical safety is not our only concern, Shimmer of Dawn said gently. Psychological safety matters too. You saw how the younglings reacted. Had to acknowledge the truth in that. What do you want me to do? send Apollo back to Earth. That may be necessary, Bristle of Authority admitted. Though it pains me to say it, this program is meant to build bridges between species, not create fear and misunderstanding. But maybe that's exactly why Apollo should stay, a new voice said from the doorway. Everyone turned. Standing there was a student who looked barely into adolescence. His scales showed the muted colors of someone trying to control strong emotions. Scale of Wisdom said, "Students are not permitted in administrative meetings." "I know, teacher, I apologize, but I had to speak." The young stepped into the room, his tail curled tight with nervousness but his posture determined. "I was there for the unveiling. I was frightened too, but I have been thinking about it since." "Go on," Shimmer of Dawn said, her glow softening slightly. "Looked at, you said humans learn to understand predators, that you look at things that scare you and want to know more. Is this not what education is supposed to be? Learning about things that are difficult or uncomfortable?" "That is different," Whisker of Learning started to say, but continued. "Is it? We learn about gravity by studying how things fall. We learn about chemistry through reactions that can be dangerous if mishandled. We learn about the universe by looking at phenomena that could destroy entire star systems. Why should we not learn about predators by observing one safely?" The room fell silent, felt a surge of gratitude toward this brave young student who had somehow grasped what she had failed to communicate. "Besides," added, his voice dropping slightly, "if humans can learn to overcome their fear of snakes, perhaps we can too. That seems like a valuable lesson." Bristle of Authority's whiskers twitched in what might have been amusement. "You make a compelling argument, young scholar, but you are not the one who must answer to frightened parents." "Then maybe the parents need to learn too," said simply. After the student left, the administrators sat in contemplative silence. Finally, Crystal of Depth spoke. "The youngling raises interesting points. If we send the snake away, we teach our students that running from fear is acceptable, that certain types of knowledge are too dangerous to pursue. We also teach them that their emotional matters," Whisker of Learning countered, "that their fears are valid and respected." "Both can be true," suggested carefully. "What if we approached this differently? Not as a comfort animal exhibit, but as a serious educational program about predator-prey relationships, about overcoming instinctive responses, about the diversity of how different species relate to the natural world." Shimmer of Dawn's glow cycled through several colors as she considered. "You would need to develop a comprehensive curriculum, age-appropriate exposure protocols, training for teachers, and it would have to be completely voluntary. No student should be forced to participate." "I can do that," said immediately. "I'll work with your education specialists. We'll create something safe and valuable." Bristle of Authority looked around the table, gauging reactions. "This is highly irregular. No other species has presented anything remotely controversial for this program." "Perhaps that is the problem," Scale of Wisdom said thoughtfully. "Perhaps we have been too cautious, too focused on comfort rather than growth." The vote, when it came, was not unanimous, but it was enough. Apollo would stay on probationary basis, subject to strict educational protocols and continuous evaluation. As the meeting adjourned, Shimmer of Dawn floated beside. "You have created quite a situation, Ambassador." "I really didn't mean to," said tiredly. "I just thought people would find him beautiful." "Perhaps they will learn to," the said, "in time, but you must understand something. What you have brought to this station is not just a snake. You have brought a mirror that shows us something uncomfortable about ourselves." "What's that?" "That we are still, in many ways, prey, and that humans are predators who have learned to be gentle. It is a disturbing combination for many of us to process." Watched through the window as maintenance workers installed additional safety features around Apollo's enclosure. Already, she could see a few brave students returning, standing at a safe distance, watching the glass case with a mixture of fear and undeniable curiosity. "Maybe that's the real lesson," said softly. "Not about snakes, but about what we're capable of becoming when we face our fears instead of running from them." Shimmer of Dawn's glow warmed slightly. "A very human perspective, Ambassador. Let us hope the rest of the galaxy is ready for it." The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of activity. Worked 16-hour days developing educational materials, consulting with, and training teachers who were brave enough to volunteer. The program they created was unlike anything else in the Alliance's education system. It started with the basics. Before any student was allowed near Apollo's habitat, they attended a series of lectures about predator-prey relationships, evolutionary biology, and the neurological basis of instinctive fear responses. Brought in virtual reality programs that let students experience being predators themselves, understanding that perspective before approaching a real one. The psychologists were initially skeptical, but they couldn't argue with the data. Students who went through the preparatory program showed significantly reduced fear responses. Knowledge, it turned out, really did help manage instinct. The first official viewing session was scheduled for a small group of volunteers. 3 students had signed up: Spark of Courage, a young whose name proved prophetic, a teenage who had been fascinated by Earth biology ever since humans joined the Alliance, and the student who had spoken up in the administrative meeting. Prepared Apollo's habitat carefully. She'd added more enrichment items, making sure he would be active and interesting to observe. She'd timed his feeding to be several days away, so there would be no chance of triggering prey-drive behaviors. Everything had to be perfect. The 3 students entered the common area with their teacher, a named Glow of Knowledge who had volunteered to supervise. They approached the enclosure slowly, maintaining what they considered a safe distance of about 3 meters. Sat on the floor directly in front of the glass, cross-legged and relaxed. Apollo was coiled in her lap, having been removed from his habitat for the demonstration. The snake was calm, his head resting on her arm, occasionally tasting the air with his forked tongue. "Thank you all for being here," said softly. "I know this is difficult. What you're doing right now, being here despite your fear, is incredibly brave." Spark of Courage dimmed slightly, her equivalent of nervous fidgeting. "How do you remain so calm? It is right there touching you." "Because I understand him. Apollo isn't mysterious to me. I know what he can and cannot do. I know what he needs, what makes him comfortable, what stresses him. That knowledge replaces fear with confidence." "But it is still a predator," said, his whiskers twitching. "Its nature has not changed simply because you understand it." "No, you're absolutely right. Apollo is still a predator. He still eats meat. If I put a mouse in front of him when he's hungry, his instincts would trigger and he would hunt. But here's what's important to understand. Being a predator doesn't make him evil or even dangerous in most contexts. It just makes him what he is." Gently stroked Apollo's scales and the snake adjusted his coils slightly in response. All 3 students tensed but held their ground. "Look at how he moves. See how deliberate and slow it is. Ball pythons aren't fast strikers. They're ambush hunters in nature, yes, but they rely on patience and camouflage, not speed. His movements are predictable once you learn to read them." Crept forward slightly, his scales shifting to a lighter, more curious color. "May I observe him more closely?" "Of course. Move slowly, stop whenever you feel uncomfortable." The young approached until he was about a meter away. Apollo's tongue flicked out and froze but didn't retreat. "What is it doing?" "Smelling you. Snakes have a special organ called this organ. When Apollo flicks his tongue, he's collecting chemical particles from the air and analyzing them. It's how he senses his environment. He's not threatening you. He's just curious about this new creature near him." "Curious? It experiences curiosity." "All animals do, to varying degrees. Apollo's is pretty basic, just gathering sensory information, but yes, he's aware of you. He's processing your presence." settled into a sitting position, his tail curled around his body in a relaxation posture. I thought predators were all aggression and hunger, but this creature seems almost peaceful. That's because he is. Apollo spends maybe an hour a week actually being a predator when he eats. The rest of the time he's just existing like any other animal. He sleeps, he basks in warmth, he explores his environment. Being a predator is what he does, not what he is every single moment. Moved closer now too, his initial terror giving way to scientific interest. On, we have stories about tunnel vipers. They are portrayed as relentless hunters, always seeking prey, always dangerous. Are Earth serpents truly so different? Probably not as different as you think. Real tunnel vipers, if they're anything like Earth's venomous snakes, probably spend most of their time doing the same things Apollo does. Resting, conserving energy, maintaining body temperature. The stories you tell make them into monsters, but they're really just animals trying to survive. Stories shape perception. Glow of knowledge observed from her position near the back. Her glow had stabilized to an interested amber. We tell cautionary tales to protect our young, but perhaps we have made our predators into something more terrible than they truly are. Nodded, every culture does this. Humans too. We have stories about man-eating sharks when shark attacks are incredibly rare. We made wolves into monsters in our fairy tales, even as we were domesticating their descendants into dogs. Fear exaggerates threat. Spark of Courage finally gathered her courage to approach. She floated down to viewing level, her crystalline body reflecting the light. When you hold it like that, Ambassador, it almost seems like you care for it, the way we care for our crystal jellyfish. I do care for him, very much. Apollo depends on me for everything: food, warmth, shelter, safety. That creates a bond, even if it's not the same kind of social bond I might have with a dog. I'm responsible for his, and I take that seriously. But how did this begin? Asked. How did humans first decide to keep predators as companions? Thought about the question. Honestly, we're not entirely sure. With dogs, it might have started with wolves scavenging near human camps, a mutually beneficial relationship that evolved over thousands of years. With reptiles, it was probably much more recent. Maybe someone found a snake as a baby and raised it. Maybe ancient humans kept them for practical reasons, like controlling rodent populations. Eventually, some humans just started appreciating them for what they are. But why continue? Asked. Why not just leave predators in the wild where they belong? Because understanding predators teaches us about ourselves. Humans are predators too, remember. We have those same instincts, that same capacity for hunting and aggression. But we're also capable of compassion and restraint. Keeping animals like Apollo reminds us that predatory nature and peaceful coexistence aren't contradictory. Apollo chose that moment to yawn, his mouth opening wide to reveal the pink interior and the rows of backward-curving teeth designed to hold struggling prey. All three students flinched, but notably none of them fled. Those teeth, Spark of Courage said with something like wonder, they are designed for killing. For holding prey, yes, but also he just yawned. It's a common behavior in snakes, probably related to adjusting their jaws or helping to smell better. Even predatory features have mundane purposes. The session continued for another hour. Answered questions, demonstrated Apollo's behaviors, and gradually helped the students see the snake as an animal rather than a monster. By the end, was sitting close enough to the glass to see the individual scales on Apollo's body, was taking notes with fierce concentration. Even Spark of Courage had brightened considerably.